This happened last fall, and I still haven't told many people about it because I genuinely don't know how to explain it. There's an abandoned motel about 20 minutes outside my town. It sits just off an old highway that barely anyone uses anymore. You could see it from the road, 2 stories, long balcony walkway, and every door facing the parking lot. The sign out front is half broken, hanging by one chain, swinging in the wind. I went there alone. I know, that was stupid. I'd driven past it dozens of times and always wondered what it looked like inside. One Friday around 5 p.m., while it was still light out, I finally pulled in. I told myself I was taking photos for a film project. In reality, I just wanted the adrenaline. The parking lot was completely empty. Cracked asphalt, weeds growing through the painted lines, and every door either boarded up or slightly open. I parked near the edge of the lot, facing the exit, just in case. I don't know why I did that, but I'm glad I did. Most of the ground floor rooms were locked tight, but one near the corner was slightly open. The number on the door read 214, even though it was clearly on the first floor. I remember thinking that was odd. Regardless, I pushed the door open slowly. The smell hit me immediately. Mold, rot, old carpet soaked with something I didn't want to think about. The room was trashed. Mattress flipped over, bathroom mirror shattered, graffiti covering the walls, beer bottles scattered across the floor. I walked around for maybe a minute, took a couple pictures, and that's when I heard it. A knock, 3 slow taps from the wall behind me. I froze. It wasn't loud, it wasn't aggressive, just 3 deliberate knocks. I turned towards the wall. On the other side of it should have been room 215. I waited. Nothing, just silence. I told myself it was the pipes. Old buildings make noise all the time. I stepped outside the room, and that's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There was no door to room 215. I specifically remember seeing 213, then 216. 214 was the last door on the side of the building. There was no 215. No boarded up entrance, nothing. The layout didn't make sense. The building wasn't wide enough to fit another room between 214 and the corner. I stood there staring at the wall from the outside, trying to understand. And that's when I heard it again. 3 knocks this time. It came from inside 214. I slowly turned back. I hadn't closed the door all the way when I walked out. It was still cracked open. I stepped closer, peeked inside. There was nothing. No movement, no sound. I didn't think. I just started backing away. And that's when I saw movement. Not inside 214. It was upstairs. On the 2nd floor balcony, someone was standing outside one of the rooms. Directly above me, just standing there. I couldn't make out their face because of the shadow from the overhang, but I could see the outline clearly. They were tall and very thin, and they were standing completely still. I stared at them for a good 5 seconds, but they didn't move. "Hello?" I called out, immediately regretting it because there was no response. I took a few steps backwards towards the stairs leading down to my car, and then they did something I still can't explain. They slowly lifted their arm and pointed down at room 214. My heart started racing. I looked back at the open doorway behind me. It was still dark inside. When I looked back up at the balcony, they were gone, completely gone. That's when I heard something slam inside 214. The door swung open fully, hitting the wall hard. I flinched, and in that split second, I swear I saw someone standing inside the bathroom area. Just for a second, then nothing. I ran as fast as I could. I didn't care if I looked paranoid or crazy. I jumped in my car, locked the doors immediately, started the engine and floored it, without looking back. When I got home, I tried to calm myself down. I researched the motel. It shut down in the early 2000s after a fire in one of the rooms. Official reports said only 1 person died, but older forums told a different story. Apparently, during renovations in the late 90s, workers discovered a sealed off room behind one of the first floor walls. There was no door, no windows, just a hollow space between rooms. Inside they found furniture, a mattress and food wrappers, like someone had been living there. There was no records of who built it, and there was no explanation for why it was sealed. All it said was the renovation stopped shortly after. Here's the part that still keeps me up at night. A few days later, I went back on Google Maps. I zoomed in on the layout of the motel. There is no room 214. The numbering skips from 213 to 216. I know what I walked into. I know I heard knocking, and I know someone pointed at the room from above. But according to every layout I can find, the room doesn't exist. I couldn't have hallucinated the entire thing. At least that's what I keep telling myself. Because if I didn't imagine it, then something was knocking from a room that isn't supposed to be there, and something wanted me to go back inside. My friends and I had always talked about going camping for years. It was one of those plans that lived in our group chat but never actually happened. Someone was always busy, something always came up. Until one night in early December, when for once, everyone was free. We decided to go that same night. We packed fast, tents, thermal sleeping bags, winter gear, and drove about 40 minutes into a secluded Appalachian mountain trail. The kind of place with no cell service, no nearby roads. If something went wrong, no one was coming to help. By the time we parked and started hiking, the sun was already going down. The woods got dark fast. After about an hour of walking, the temperature dropped even more, and snow started falling. Not enough to stop us, just enough to be unsettling. We found a small clearing off the trail to set up camp. Once the fire was going, my friend Andy reached into his backpack and pulled out a bag of mushrooms. Everyone was excited, everyone except me. I've always been the cautious one, and the idea of tripping in the middle of the Appalachian wilderness at night didn't feel right. But when the bag came around, I didn't want to be the odd one out, so I pretended to take some. I didn't. About an hour later, the sun was completely gone. The forest around us was pitch black, beyond the firelight. The snow had picked up, coating the ground in a thin white layer. That's when I noticed Joe. He was sitting perfectly still, staring into the woods. I asked him if he was okay. He didn't answer. At first I thought he was just deep into the trip. Then, without taking his eyes off the trees, he started crying. Not quietly, full, uncontrollable sobbing. My stomach tightened. I looked at my other friends. They were doing the same thing. All three of them were staring into the exact same spot in the forest, silent, frozen, like something had their full attention. I tried telling myself it was just the mushrooms, that my sober brain was overthinking it. To prove it, I grabbed my flashlight and walked towards the direction they were staring. The beam cut through the trees as I stepped deeper into the woods. Every sound felt louder, the crunch of snow under my boots, my breathing, the wind moving branches overhead. I walked about 50 feet away and turned back yelling, "There's nobody there." That's when I looked down. There were footprints in the snow. They weren't ours. They came from deeper in the woods, stopped behind a large tree, and then turned and headed back the way they came. Next to the footprints, half covered in snow, was a mask. A cheap Halloween mask, dirty, warped, and staring up at me with empty black eye holes. My heart dropped. Someone had been standing there, close enough to see our fire, close enough to watch us. Then they quietly walked back into the darkness. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I walked back to camp as calmly as I could and told everyone the snow was getting worse and that we needed to leave immediately. Something in my voice must have cut through whatever they were experiencing because no one argued. We packed up fast. No jokes, no talking. The entire hike back to the car felt wrong, like we were being followed. I kept turning around, expected to see someone standing just beyond the tree line. I never did. But I still think about those footprints, how they stopped just behind a tree. And I still wonder how long that person had been standing there before I noticed. Because if we hadn't decided to leave, I don't think they would have stayed hidden much longer. It was my mother's birthday. She was hosting a small party at her house. Nothing wild, just close family, food on the tables, and everyone talking a little louder than usual. I had driven a little over an hour to get there, and for most of the night, everything felt normal, comfortable even. But as the evening went on, the mood outside started to change. By the time the sun went down, the snow started coming hard. At first it was light, almost peaceful, but within an hour it turned into thick sheets blowing sideways across the windows. The kind of snow that sticks instantly and muffles sound. I checked my phone, it was getting late. I told my parents I should probably head out before it gets worse. They insisted I stay. I've had a few beers, nothing crazy, but enough for them to suggest I sleep it off. I felt fine, clear-headed, steady. I didn't want to be stuck there overnight, so I grabbed my jacket and headed to my car. That decision still bothers me. The first part of the drive was fine. Quiet roads, snow falling heavier every mile. About 25 minutes in, visibility dropped fast. The headlights barely cut through the white in front of me. The road went from wet to completely buried. Then my steering wheel stopped responding. The car started sliding sideways. I tried to correct it, gently like you're supposed to. It didn't matter. The tires caught nothing. The next thing I knew, I slid into a shallow ditch. The car jolted to a stop. The engine was still running, the headlights were on, but I was stuck. I was on a narrow back road, dense woods on both sides. No street lights, no houses, just trees, snow, and silence. I called for a tow truck. They said it could be over an hour. I called my dad. He told me to stay in the car and lock the doors. He said he was on his way. So I waited. At first I only heard the wind and the snow hitting the car. Then I heard something else. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching through the fresh snow, and they were getting closer. I leaned forward, trying to see through the windshield, but the snowfall was too heavy. The woods beyond the headlights were just dark shapes. The footsteps didn't stop. They circled the car. That's when panic set in. I cracked the door open slightly and looked down. There were footprints, fresh ones, deep, uneven, circling my car. Who would be out here, in this weather, on a dead road in the middle of nowhere? That's when I noticed a narrow path leading into the woods. It looked worn, like it was used often. Against my better judgment, I grabbed my pistol from the glove box and stepped out of the car. The cold hit instantly. I followed the path about 50 feet into the trees. That's when I saw the blood. Dark against the snow, a trail of it. I followed it a few more steps until it led to a deer lying on its side. At first I thought I had been hit by a car, but something was wrong. The deer's head was gone. Not torn, not mangled, gone. A deep fear hit me all at once. Whatever did this wasn't an accident, and whatever made those footprints was close. I turned and walked back towards my car, trying not to run. When I reached it, my hands were shaking. I grabbed the door handle and I opened the door. I nearly passed out. Sitting in my passenger seat was the deer's head. Its eyes were open. Snow was melting into the fabric beneath it. I slammed the door shut and locked it. 2 minutes later, I saw headlights through the snow. My dad pulled up behind me. He ran to my car. He looked at my face and told me to get in his car immediately. We didn't talk on the drive back. I never asked him what he saw in my car, and he's never brought it up since. This story happened at an amusement park my friends and I visit every year. Every summer we drive down to the shore and stay there for a few days. Right along the beach there's a huge amusement park with dozens of rides, games, and food stands. Whenever we go, my friends and I try to stay at the park as late as possible. It closes at midnight, and almost every night we're there until the very last minute. But one night in particular is something I'll never forget. That night, my best friend dared me to go talk to the psychic in the park. Near the back of the boardwalk, there was a small fortune-telling stand. It had a faded sign outside that said things like palm readings and know your future. Honestly, nobody ever went there. Most people walked right past it on their way to the rides because it was kind of boring compared to everything else. But since it was a dare, I agreed. I didn't want to look like a coward in front of my friends. The truth is, I had never believed in any of that spiritual or psychic stuff anyway. My plan was honestly just to mess around with the guy for a bit and see what he would say. So I started walking towards the stand while my friends followed behind me. When we got there, I saw an older man sitting in a chair behind a small wooden table. He was quietly reading a book under a dim light. When he noticed us standing there, he looked up. "Well, hello there," he said calmly. I sat down across from him and asked, half joking, "So, can you predict my future?" The second I said that, my friends started laughing at me. They were clearly expecting the guy to say something ridiculous. But the man didn't seem bothered at all. He simply closed his book and nodded. "Yes, follow me." He gestured towards a curtain behind the stand that led to a small back room. For a moment I hesitated. Something about the place suddenly felt uncomfortable. But since my friends were watching, I went anyway. They stayed outside while I followed the man behind the curtain. Inside, the room was barely lit. The only light came from a small lamp sitting on a table. In the center of the room, there was a single chair. The whole setup honestly looked like something straight out of a cheap horror movie. Still, I sat down and waited. The man slowly walked over to a table and picked up a crystal ball, the kind you always see in the movies. He placed it in front of him and stared into it silently. I remember trying not to laugh, because I assumed he was about to tell me some generic fortune teller nonsense. But after a few seconds, his expression changed. His face became serious. Then he said something that immediately made my stomach drop. "Something tragic is gonna happen to you tonight." The way he said it sent chills down my spine. I stared at him, trying to figure out if he was joking, but he didn't smile. Instead, he leaned slightly closer and said in a quieter voice, "If I were you, I would be very careful tonight." At that point, I had completely lost the urge to joke around. I suddenly felt extremely uncomfortable being in that room, so I quickly stood up. Thanks," I muttered before walking out. My friends were waiting outside, and the second I stepped out, they started asking how it went. Let's just get out of here," I told them. "I don't want to be anywhere near that psychic stand anymore." Even though I knew it was probably fake, what he said stuck in my head. I couldn't stop thinking about it. For the next few minutes, I kept wondering the same thing over and over. What did he mean by something tragic? Was I actually in danger? Eventually, my friends convinced me that the guy was just trying to scare people. They told me fortune tellers say stuff like that all the time. After a while, I started calming down. We went back to walking around the amusement park and riding different rides like normal. And honestly, I started forgetting about the whole thing. Everything felt normal again. Until we decided to ride one of the roller coasters. We waited in line for a few minutes until it was finally our turn to board. But just as we were about to get on, the ride suddenly stopped working. The operators told everyone there was a small malfunction and that they needed to check the ride to make sure everything was safe, so we waited. About 10 minutes later, they reopened the ride. People started getting back on the coaster, including us. I sat down in one of the seats and pulled the safety bar down. The ride operators began checking everyone's restraints, and right before the coaster was about to take off, I suddenly remembered what the psychic had said earlier. Something tragic is going to happen to you tonight. A horrible feeling hit my stomach. Without really thinking, I stood up and got off the ride. My friends looked confused. "Dude, what are you doing?" one of them asked. I told them I had a bad feeling and that we should wait. Somehow I managed to convince them to get off too. Then I told the ride operator that they should probably send the coaster for a test run before letting people ride again. He seemed a little annoyed, but he ultimately agreed. So they sent the empty cart up the track. What happened next still gives me chills to this day. As the coaster reached one of the turns, the car suddenly malfunctioned again. This time it completely derailed from the track and dropped about 10 feet down onto the maintenance area below. Everyone watching went completely silent. If that cart had been full of people, it would have been tragic. We would have been on it too. In that moment, I realized something terrifying. That accident could have been the tragic event the psychic was warning me about. Even now, years later, I still think about that night. And I still can't decide whether what the psychic said was just a coincidence, or if somehow he really did know something terrible was about to happen. This happened when I was 15 years old, on a night when my parents went out to dinner with some friends. Nothing special, just one of those normal evenings where you're home alone for a few hours. I didn't mind. I actually liked being alone. The house felt quieter, calmer. I could do my own thing without anyone bothering me. Around 9 o'clock, I got hungry and ordered a pizza. I remember feeling kind of excited about it. Just me, a movie, and food showing up at my door. Normal stuff. About 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I didn't even hesitate. I assumed the delivery guy was early. I walked up, opened the door, and immediately knew something was wrong. It wasn't the pizza guy. It was a man I'd never seen before, standing way too close to the door. He looked disoriented, like he'd just woken up somewhere unfamiliar. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair messy, and his eyes kept darting around, like he couldn't focus on one thing for more than a second. He stared at me for a moment, then asked, where am I? That caught me off guard. I told him the name of the street, and he frowned, like it didn't help at all. Then he asked how to get to the nearest gas station. Something about the way he spoke bothered me. His voice was calm, but his body language wasn't. He kept shifting his weight, glancing past me into the house, like he was trying to see who else was inside. I hesitated, but I gave him directions anyway. I pointed down the street, explained where to turn, and tried to make it quick. He just stood there, staring at me. After a few seconds, I said I had to go and closed the door. I locked it immediately. I told myself he was just lost, maybe drunk, maybe dealing with something. Still, I didn't feel right about it. A little while later, the pizza arrived. Real delivery driver, normal interaction. I locked the door again and brought the box into the living room, trying to shake the uneasy feeling. I sat down, turned the TV on, and started eating. That's when the doorbell rang again. I froze. I wasn't expecting anyone. I muted the TV and waited. The bell rang a second time, longer this time, like whoever was pressing it was leaning into it. I didn't answer. Instead, I slowly moved towards the front window and pulled the curtain back just enough to look outside. It was him. The same man, standing right at the door. My stomach dropped. He was closer than before, almost pressed up against the door. And now he wasn't pretending to be confused. His face was tense, focused, like he'd made up his mind about something. I stepped back and stayed quiet. The doorbell stopped for about 2 seconds. Then he started pounding on the door. Not knocking, pounding. His fist slammed into the wood again and again, hard enough that the door rattled in its frame. He started yelling words I couldn't fully make out, but his tone was angry now, impatient, like I was doing something wrong by not letting him in. I ran to my room, locked the door, and called the police with shaking hands. While I was on the phone, I could still hear him, moving, hitting the door, trying to handle. I remember the operator asking me if I knew him. I said no. I remember her asking if I was alone. I said yes. The pounding suddenly stopped. I waited, barely breathing. After a minute, I looked out the window again. He was gone. The police arrived shortly after and searched the area, but they didn't find anyone. No witnesses, no explanation for why he came back, or why he was so determined to get inside. They told me he was probably just someone confused or intoxicated. But I still think about how easily he found my house again, and how he knew I was alone. Because to this day, I'm convinced the only reason he didn't get inside is because I stopped answering the door when something felt wrong.